thank you. This is exciting. We did it again. We have an awesome speaker, and she's back there ready to go. Tonight, the Washington County Republican Committee Lincoln Day tradition carries on. We try to bring you cutting-edge and timely speakers, and tonight, we've got a good one. It is our great honor to host and present these speakers. One more time. It's always a great honor to host those who present themselves for nomination to our party for the President of the United States. I am proud that our party has offered such a deep field of candidates for our consideration. I'm sure we all have our personal favorites. However, we owe it to every candidate to listen to them and consider what they say. Carly has engaged the voters all over the country in an old-fashioned way by introducing herself and getting to know us, presenting her ideas, and asking us for our vote. Her career reinforces Margaret Thatcher's observation in 1965 when she said, "In politics, if you want something said, ask a man. If you want something done, ask a woman." Carly clearly understands the difference between activity and accomplishment. Carly has stood and will stand ready to work in this office should she be elected. She has proven and improved her position in the primary race with stellar performances in 2 televised Republican debates. I'd like you to watch a clip. I think this encapsulates Carly Fiorina. Please watch this clip with me.
To do it.
Diana, I'd like to link these 2 issues, both of which are incredibly important, Iran and Planned Parenthood. One has something to do with the defense of the security of this nation. The other has something to do with the defense of the character of this nation. You have not heard a plan about Iran from any politician up here. Here's my plan. On day 1 in the Oval Office, I will make 2 phone calls. The first to my good friend Bibi Netanyahu to reassure him we will stand with the state of Israel. The second to the Supreme Leader to tell him that unless and until he opens every military and every nuclear facility to real anytime, anywhere inspections by our people, not his, we, the United States of America, will make it as difficult as possible to move money around the global financial system. We can do that. We don't need anyone's cooperation to do it. And every ally and every adversary we have in this world will know that the United States of America is back in the leadership business, which is how we must stand with our allies. As regards Planned Parenthood, anyone who has watched this videotape, I dare Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama to watch these tapes. Watch a fully formed fetus on the table, its heart beating, its legs kicking, while someone says we have to keep it alive to harvest its brain. This is about the character of our nation. And if we will not stand up and force President Obama to veto this bill, shame on us.
Ladies and gentlemen, please help me give a warm Arkansas welcome to Carly Fiorina.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. It's so great to be with you. I'm so delighted to be here in Arkansas at the Washington County GOP Lincoln Day dinner. And I must say, I'm spoiled now. I'm already spoiled. I've just gotten out onto the stage, but I get to follow the singing men of Arkansas. You guys are awesome. I want to take you on the road. Really inspiring. And I'm also so delighted to be here, thanks to the Washington County GOP and the NRA for honoring those in law enforcement. You know, I do not think we recognize enough how difficult your work is for you and your families. I do not think we recognize often enough how dangerous your work is. And I do not think we thank you often enough for keeping our families and our communities safe. Thank you. many of you watched any portion of the Benghazi hearings today? So, I think Trey Gowdy did a really good job. I also think it is true that Mrs. Clinton will never truly be held accountable for anything she has done, including Benghazi, until and unless we have a nominee who's prepared to hold her accountable. And while not all of you may have made up your minds about who you're going to support, I bet you that in your heart of hearts, every single one of you really want to see me debate Hillary Clinton. So remember that, because there's only one way that's going to happen. You know, I have to say that at some level, I do have some empathy for Hillary Clinton. You know, it is different when you're a woman running for president. And I'm reminded of a question that I got asked very early on in my candidacy. It was a Saturday morning. I was on national television. And I was asked this question: did I believe that a woman's hormones prevent her from serving in the Oval Office? My answer was, gee, can we think of a single instance in which a man's judgment might have been clouded by his hormones? There are many differences between Hillary Clinton and I, but I will tell you one big difference. I will never ask for your vote just because I'm a woman, although I'm proud to be one. I will ask for your votes and your support and your prayers because I believe I am the most qualified candidate to win this job and to do this job. I think there's a lot at stake for our nation. I think we are at a pivotal point in our nation's history. It is why I am running, and it is why I think so many Americans feel a deep sense of disquiet. But to talk about what's at stake in our nation, I want to start somewhere very far away. I want to start with an experience that I had in January of this year. Before I launched my campaign for the presidency, I was chairman of two major charities in this country. One is called Opportunity International. We are the largest private microfinance organization in the world, a Christian-based charity. And we have lent about $6 billion, $150 at a time, and lifted millions of people out of poverty. And so, as chairman of their global board, I traveled to New Delhi. I traveled there for two purposes. One was to hold a global board meeting, but the second was to visit some of our clients. And so I traveled to the slums of New Delhi. Now, I don't know how many of you have ever been in the slums of New Delhi, but they are pretty grim places. Mountains of trash, marauding animals, sewage in the streets, people piled on top of each other. And as I climbed a rickety ladder up to a rooftop to meet with 10 of our clients, I expected to see in our clients' eyes the desperation of the circumstances I saw around them. And yet, when I met them, when I sat down with them on that rooftop, I did not see desperation. I saw hope and determination and focus and pride. Because you see, we had done far more than give these women, they were all women, $150. We had done more than given them tools or training or support. We had done even more than reach out a helping hand and take a chance on them. What we had said to them was, you have potential. You have what my mother used to call God-given gifts. And you, despite all your circumstances, can live a life of dignity and purpose and meaning. And these people lifted themselves up. They built businesses. They were hiring and employing. And they felt purpose and direction in their lives. I have traveled and lived and worked all over the world. And I am keenly aware that it is only in this nation that a young woman can start out as I did, typing and filing and answering the phones for a little 9-person real estate firm in the middle of a deep recession, go on one day to become the chief executive of what we turned into the largest technology company in the world, and run for the presidency of the United States. That is only possible in this nation. And the question is, why? Why is my story, so many of our stories, why are our stories only possible here? Why, if it is true that everyone around the world has potential, and that is true, that each of us are gifted by God regardless of our circumstances, why is it true that more things have been more possible for more people from more places here than anywhere else on earth? I think it is because this nation was founded on an idea, a visionary idea, radical at the time, but the idea was this, that each individual life has value, that we judge each individual as an individual, not as a member of a group or a class, but that each individual is judged, as Martin Luther King used to say, by the content of his or her character. And our founders said more than that, more than each individual life has value. Our founders said, here you have a right to find and use your God-given gifts to fulfill your potential. They expressed that right as the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But that is what they meant, the right to fulfill your potential. And then they went further, and this was the radical part. They said that right comes from God and cannot be taken away by man or government. Now I'll tell you a story of something that happened to me in the summer of 2014. I was giving a speech. And right before I gave the speech, a man was sitting at the lunch table with me, and he said, you know, I'm not going to agree with you on anything. And I said, well, how do you know that, sir? He said, well, I'm a Democrat. And I said, well, you might agree with me on more than you think. At the end of my speech, he came up to me and he said 2 things. First thing he said was, amen. We can win elections without sacrificing our principles, ladies and gentlemen. But the second thing he said was this, and it really stuck with me. He said, you know, Carly, we don't think of ourselves as a nation of limitless possibility anymore. And I see all the heads nodding out there, and it hit me because when we don't think of ourselves as a nation of limitless possibility anymore, we are losing the core of who we are. We always knew as Americans that if something was hard to do, great, we'd figure out how to do it. If something was worthwhile, we would pull together and get it done. And we knew that our children and our grandchildren, they had far greater possibilities than we had. We took it as a matter of faith, and yet too many Americans now think that maybe our children and our grandchildren won't have our possibilities. Here is the truth, ladies and gentlemen. We have come to a pivotal point in our nation's history where the possibilities for too many Americans, indeed the potential of this great nation, is being crushed. It is being crushed by a government that has grown so big, so powerful, so costly, so complicated, so inept, and so corrupt, and a professional political class that refuses to do anything about it. Ladies and gentlemen, I am running for the presidency of the United States because I think we were intended to be a citizen government. And I think it is high time that as citizens, we take our government back. You know, a couple months ago, I went on The View. I know it's not a Republican primary audience, but we do have to talk to people who don't yet know they agree with us. And so I went on The View, And I was having quite a great conversation with Whoopi Goldberg. I don't agree with her politics, but I like her movies, and Rosie Perez and the other hosts. And we were engaged in this very interesting conversation about Vladimir Putin, whom I've met. And they were kind of interested in what I thought about him and what I would do about him. And halfway through the conversation, Rosie Perez says to me, you know, Carly, I really like you. I think she was a little surprised. I'm not a Republican. I said, Rosie, I'm shocked. I never would have guessed. And then she asked, why are you? And you see, that's the question. We have to be able to answer that question to win in 2016. And so here was my answer. Because I know that no one of us is any better than any other one of us. Each of us is gifted by God. All of us can live lives of dignity and purpose and meaning. Each of us sometimes needs a helping hand. I certainly have. When I battled cancer, when we buried our daughter to the demons of addiction, everybody needs someone to take a chance on them. I've had plenty of people take a chance on me. But I know that our values, our policies, and our principles work better to lift everyone up. And progressives don't actually believe this. They don't actually believe that everyone has God-given gifts. They think that some are smarter than others, some are better than others, some can go ahead and take care of others. I believe that is the height of disrespect and disregard for our fellow citizens. Each of us is gifted by God, and all of us must have lives filled with possibilities in this nation. Here's something else that lots of people agree on. 75% of the American people now think we have a federal government that is corrupt. That's a big number, folks. That's a big number. And what does that mean, 75%? That means that it's Republicans, it's Democrats, it's independents, it's young, old, it's men, women. In other words, there is common ground that we actually have to do something different and take our government back. 82% of the American people now think we have a professional political class that cares more about the preservation of its own power, position, and privilege than on getting anything done. That's the basis for common ground as well. And here's the thing, folks. We know what has to get done. We actually know the answers to so many of these problems. You know them and I know them. Let's just take a few examples. We cannot continue to tangle people's lives up in webs of dependence, where they are dependent year after year, generation after generation. There's nothing about these programs of dependence that gives somebody a helping hand and takes a chance on them, but also says to them, you can live a life of dignity and purpose and meaning. And we know that work brings dignity, and family brings purpose, and faith brings meaning to our lives. We do not encourage people to move forward in their lives. We discourage them and ask them to fall back. We know that to get our economy going and growing again, we have to think about small business and quit protecting big business. For the first time, in U.S. history, we are now destroying more businesses than we are creating. 70,000 small businesses go out of business every single year now. And the truth is that small business, family-owned business, community-based businesses have always been and will always be the engine of job creation in this nation. Most people start the way I did, in a little company. 9 people. My husband, Frank, of almost 31 years, started out driving a tow truck in a family-owned auto body shop. It's how most people start. And so when we start crushing small businesses, and that is what we are doing, we are crushing job creation, entrepreneurship, innovation, and possibilities for too many. Crony capitalism is alive and well, ladies and gentlemen, and you know why? Because when government becomes so big, so powerful, so complicated, guess what? Only the big, the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected can deal with it. Because only they can hire the accountants, the lawyers, the lobbyists. I know this. I was the chief executive. By the time I left Hewlett-Packard, I was the chief executive of a $90 billion firm. We could hire lots of accountants and lawyers and lobbyists. My husband Frank and I are fortunate enough to be able to pay for an accountant. But if you are not big, and you are not powerful, and you are not fortunate enough to be able to hire all those people, you literally are getting crushed. You're getting crushed by a government so complicated you can't figure it out anymore. You're getting crushed by a 73,000-page tax code. You're getting crushed by a mountain, an avalanche of rules. We used to be proud that we were a nation of laws. We are not a nation of laws anymore. We've become a nation of rules. And who are these bureaucrats who are rolling out rules? They're not elected by anybody. They're not accountable to anybody. They just roll out rules. Here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. We have come to a pivotal place where it's not just about replacing a D in the White House with an R in the White House. Because the truth is this: government has gotten bigger, more complicated, more powerful, more inept for 50 years. How long have we been talking about reducing debts and deficits? How long have we been talking about simplifying the tax code? How long have we been talking about securing the border? How long have we been talking about caring for our veterans? The point is, there are festering problems, and they're not getting resolved. We just talk about them. Every election cycle, we kind of talk about the same things, don't we? And it just goes on, whatever your issue, whatever your cause, whatever festering problem you hope would be resolved by now. The political class has let us down. It reminds me a little bit of the difference between management and leadership. You know what managers are? Managers, they're not bad people, but managers are people who operate within the system. They operate within the status quo. They don't ever challenge the status quo. They accept it. And if the system is broken, they accept that. Leaders are altogether different. Leaders are people who know their job is to challenge the status quo, because that's the only way you change things for the better. That's the only way you actually solve problems. You know, I started as a secretary. Eventually, I became a CEO. You know how you do that? I didn't have a plan to do that. You know how you do that? You challenge the status quo, you produce results, you solve problems, you lead. And as the chief executive of Hewlett-Packard, sometimes I'll digress for a moment and tell you that sometimes people ask me, what's the difference between business and politics? Well, politics is a fact-free zone. Really, really. You can kind of say whatever you want. You can change your mind and say something entirely different. There really isn't a lot of accountability, is there? And yet, as the chief executive of Hewlett-Packard, I had to report out in excruciating detail every 90 days our facts and our results. And then I had to answer every single question in public. And then I had to tell people in excruciating detail what I thought we were going to do in the next 90 days, the next year, the next 2 years, and answer every question. And if I misrepresented any of that, I was held criminally liable. Now imagine if any other candidate running was held to that standard of account. I was recruited to save a company that was in trouble, and that's what we did. It took leadership. It took challenging the status quo. So I'm reminded the difference between management and leadership, something that Margaret Thatcher once said to her fellow countrymen and women a long time ago. At a pivotal point in her nation's history, she said this: "I am not content to manage the decline of a great nation." Well, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have been managing the decline of a great nation for quite long enough, but I am prepared. I am prepared, with your prayers, with your support, and with your votes, I am prepared to lead the resurgence of this great nation. And so we know what that's going to take. In addition to getting the economy going and growing again by putting people back to work and lifting up the job creators, we need to cut government down to size and hold it accountable. And we know what that takes. We need to actually know where every single dollar of your money is being spent, and we don't have a clue. That means we got to go to some version of zero-based budgeting, because the truth is we never talk, yes, you can applaud, we never talk about the whole budget. We haven't talked about the whole budget for 50 years, which is why the budgets just get bigger and bigger. Have you ever noticed how the government spends more money every year and yet never has enough money to do the important things? We spend more money every year, we go into debt every year, our deficits get bigger every year, and yet you ask the government to do its job, fix the roads and bridges, we need more money. Secure the border, we need more money. Care for our veterans, we need more money. Defend our nation, we need more money. That's because we don't prioritize the money we have. The only way you can prioritize the money you spend and spend less at the same time is to know where the money's being spent. Zero-based budgeting. The second thing we got to do to cut the government down to size and hold it accountable is actually to hold people accountable. Now I want to tell you a little story that will illustrate how you and I together are going to get that done. I keep talking about a citizen government, and I mean that very directly. Citizens, it is time we take our government back. Remember, maybe 18 months ago, we were rocked as a nation by a scandal at an Arizona Veterans Administration facility. And we learned that veterans had died before they'd ever gotten an appointment. And we learned as well that bureaucrats had cooked the books so that nobody would find out. And the American people were so outraged by this revelation that they put enormous pressure on the political system. And the pressure was so intense that what happened? In 3 short weeks, Congress passed a bipartisan bill. They can act if they feel the pressure. They passed a bipartisan bill saying we could fire the top 400 senior executives of the VA if they didn't do their jobs, and President Obama signed it. Pretty good idea. Maybe that ought to apply all throughout government. The point is, they responded to pressure. Now, how many people have been fired? 1. And about, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, we learned that over 300,000 veterans have died waiting for health care. This is a stain on our nation's honor, ladies and gentlemen. This too goes to the character of our nation as well as the defense of our nation. And no one is being held accountable. But it illustrates, that little story illustrates something. Pressure applied yields results. So allow me to tell you how you're going to help me. Every week, I'm going to go into the Oval Office. The president has a weekly radio address, or I might do it in a speech, but let's just stick with the radio address for the moment. And I'm going to ask you to take out your smartphones. Confession time. How many of you own a flip phone still? Okay, you need to upgrade. You have 15 months. I'm going to ask you to take out your smartphones, and I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Do you think we need to know where every single dollar of your money is being spent, and go to some version of zero-based budgeting? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. This technology exists, ladies and gentlemen. Technology is a tool that can be used to focus the frustration, the anger, but most importantly, the common sense and good judgment of the citizens of this nation on the political class of this nation. And you will press 1 for yes. Of that, I'm quite sure. Do you think we ought to hold senior executives accountable in the federal government for dereliction of duty or abuse of power? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. You will press, heck yes, number 1. I know you will. We must begin the reform process. And of course, we have to lead in the world again. We have to lead in the world again. So you heard on that little videotape what I would do to send a clear signal to reset in reality, not with a gimmicky red button, but in reality. What I would do to reset the world's perception of who we are, because the world must understand that we are going to lead. It is why we must have the strongest military on the face of the planet, and everyone has to know it. And that means ladies and gentlemen, I know more world leaders on the stage today than anyone running, with the possible exception of Hillary Clinton. But I didn't do photo ops. I did meetings, private meetings, on business and charity and policy. I have chaired the advisory board at the Central Intelligence Agency, advised 2 secretaries of defense, a head of the NSA, the CIA, a head of Homeland Security, and a secretary of state. I understand well the capabilities that this nation has. I understand well the absolute requirement that this nation uses our capabilities to lead in the world, not to rush off to war, but to make sure that we stand with our allies and confront our adversaries as well. And I also understand that when we do not value the service of those in our military, when we do not value their sacrifice, when they feel discounted, then we are not as safe or as strong a nation as we must be. Some have criticized me for saying that I wouldn't talk to Vladimir Putin for quite a while. Well, I won't, because until we can show Vladimir Putin strength, there is no point in talking to him. But what I will do is begin rebuilding the Sixth Fleet right under his nose, begin rebuilding the missile defense program right under his nose, conduct regular military exercises in the Baltic states right under his nose. I will not hesitate to work with our allies, whether it's Australia or Japan or South Korea or the Philippines, to confront the rising adversary that is China. And I will not, it's okay. And I will not hesitate as well to give our allies in the Middle East what they have requested to help us defeat ISIS. You see, ISIS is an evil that must be defeated, that must be destroyed. And what is tragic is that this administration, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, John Kerry, and President Obama, have presented the American people with a false choice. The false choice is this: if you don't agree with what we're doing or not doing, there is nothing we can do but rush off to war. It is false. There is much that we can do. It's just they haven't done it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to start giving our allies in the Middle East what they have asked us for. Do you remember King Abdullah of Jordan, who came to this nation? Do you remember the Jordanian pilot was burned alive in a cage while he was here? Do you know why he was here? I've known him a long time. He was here asking us for bombs and material. We have not provided them. And so he is now seeking them from the Chinese. Imagine the Middle East with Russia and China and Iran. Egypt has asked us to share intelligence. The Kurds have asked us to arm them for 3 years. The point is, we have allies who will help us defeat this evil, but not unless they sense leadership and resolve and support from the United States of America. Ladies and gentlemen, it is easy. It is easy, as so many of our fellow citizens have, to become discouraged. It is easy to sit back and say, you know what, it's never going to change. It hasn't changed. Why is it that so many people stop voting? It's not that many of them don't care, it's that they think they don't count. And yet, every problem we have can be solved. Every wound we have is self-inflicted. What we need now is leadership. And what we need as well is citizenship. So, ladies and gentlemen, I can win this job. But I would ask you to think very carefully about what it takes to do this job, because the job needs doing now. We need somebody who understands how the economy actually works so we can get it going and growing again. We need somebody who understands how the world works and who's in it and the vital role that this nation plays. We need somebody who understands bureaucracies, how to hold them to account and cut them down to size. We need somebody who understands technology, because technology is a tool. It is the most powerful tool for democratization ever devised, and it can be used to re-engage citizens in the process of their government, but it is also a weapon that is being used against us. And so it matters, actually, that Hillary Clinton thinks you can wipe a server with a towel. And finally, I think we need to have somebody who understands what leadership is. Leadership, you know, when I was a secretary, I used to think a leader was somebody with a big office, a big parking space, a lot of perks. And then I got older and wiser. And I learned that there were people with big offices and big titles who were not leading. You see, leadership is not about the size of your office, the size of your airplane, the size of your ego. Leadership is about service. Leadership is about challenging the status quo, producing results, solving problems. The highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential in others. And now we need a leader who is prepared to unlock the potential of this great nation. So, ladies and gentlemen, as we think about the pivotal point of our nation, as we think about what's at stake, I've said that I think it's really important to remember who we are. Because I believe when we remember who we are as a nation, then we will also know what we must do and what we must be to be the nation that we envision for the 21st century. So think about two of the most powerful symbols of our nation's democracy, because I think they tell us everything we need to know about what we must be. Picture in your minds Lady Liberty. She stands tall and strong, the way America must always be. She is clear-eyed and resolute. She doesn't shield her eyes from the realities or the evils of the world, but she nevertheless faces out into the world, which is the way we must always face. And she holds her torch high, because she knows she is a beacon of hope in a very troubled world. And Lady Justice holds a sword by her side, because she is a fighter. She is a warrior for the values and the principles that have made this nation great. She holds a scale in her other hand. And with that scale, she reminds us, all of us are equal in the eyes of God. And so all of us must be equal in the eyes of the law and government, powerful and powerless alike. And she wears a blindfold. And with that blindfold, I think she says to us, she reminds us that it must be true, it can be true, that in this nation, in this century, it does not matter what you look like. It does not matter who you are. It does not matter how you start. It does not matter your circumstances. Here in this nation, every American's life must be filled with the possibilities that come from their God-given gifts. And we must be one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. God bless you all. Go Hogs.